flaming sword. The flaming sword and the two cherubs prophecy. Christ was in the beginning with two cherubs in the garden with the tree of life, and this is located at Jerusalem. And the prophecy and all of these things in the teachings of the Old Testament will reveal this. Looking to Genesis chapter 3, verse 23 and 24, it says, "Therefore the Lord God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden cherubs and a flaming sword, which turned every way to keep the way of the tree of life." So we see Adam was driven out east, and two cherubs and a flaming sword was placed there at the east to protect the tree of life. And what's interesting is that you'll look and see that the facing location of the temple of God is facing eastward. And two cherubs are there protecting the entry of the Holy of Holies. The two cherubs here are seen protecting the entry to the location. And this is symbolic of the Garden of Eden. We see in the Solomon's temple, the Holy of Holies is being guarded by the two angels. And it's also interesting that if you look to the book of Genesis, that Cain went out eastward from Eden to the land of Nod, which is in Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is in the east. And so we know that that location is directly related towards Jerusalem. And if you look at the temple layout and the construct of it, it is interesting to note that the most holy place, the Holy of Holies, if you go out past the porch, it also has the court of the woman. And Adam was sent out with his wife east from the Garden of Eden. The inner court towards the Holy of Holies was the location where the men would be able to be, and the outwardmost outer court was where the women were to be, and this is the likeness of Adam and Eve. Adam was sent out from the presence of God eastward to the east, facing the threshold of the temple, and this is where you see the temple location facing eastward going into the Garden of Gethsemane. God planted trees in the Garden of Eden, and it is also in the likeness that there was a Garden of Eden and the Garden of Gethsemane in that location where there was a garden planted east. Genesis chapter 2 verse 8 says, "The Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put man whom he had formed." And there are four rivers that flowed from Eden, and this is coming out of the threshold of the temple in the return of Christ. It comes out of the fountain of the living water. But in Eden, there was a river of water that flowed out, and then it branched out into four heads. And the temple has four directions at the north, south, east, and west, with four gates, north, south, east, and west. You see in Ezekiel chapter 43, verse 1 and 2, it says, "Afterward he brought me to the gate, even the gate that looketh towards the east. And behold, the glory of God of Israel came from the way of the east, and his voice was like the noise of many waters, and the earth shined with his glory. His mouth is as many waters." And how many waters came out of Eden? Eden had four waters branching out. Many waters. Revelation chapter 1 verse 15 says, "And his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters." The water proceeds from the mouth of Christ, the throne. This water flowing from the throne room, the temple threshold. And if you look at the throne, you'll see the voice of many waters, and you'll see also the location in Eden, the many waters coming out from the throne. And this is how we know the likeness of Christ is in the Garden of Eden as well from the beginning. Revelation chapter 22 verse 1 says, and he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. And in the midst of the street of it, on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. And the river comes out of the temple facing east, out of the east gate. In the book of Ezekiel, it explains this on the return of Christ. We see that the water flows out of the temple, out the threshold, and out through the Garden of Gethsemane. Ezekiel chapter 47 verse 1 and 2 says, "Afterward he brought me again unto the door of the house, and behold, waters issued out from under the threshold of the house eastward, For the forefront of the house stood toward the east, and the waters came down from the right side of the house at the south side of the altar. Then brought he me out of the way of the gate northward, and led me about the way without unto the utter gate by the way that looketh eastward, and behold, there ran out waters on the right side. And so we see in the temple diagram here that the waters are flowing from the Holy of Holies. And this is the location of the voice of many waters flowing out of the temple, and they break out into different locations. And this is the same thing that occurred in the Garden of Eden. If you look to the Garden of Eden, the rivers flowed out the four gates, four different directions. Genesis chapter 2, verse 10 through 14 says, And a river went out of Eden to water the ground, and from thence it was parted, and became into four heads. The name of the first is Pison, that is it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good. There is bdellium and the onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is it that compasseth the whole land of Ethiopia. And the name of the third river is Hiddekel, that is it which goeth toward the east of Assyria. And the fourth river is Euphrates. And in the temple on the return of Christ, the city of God, it has the north, south, east, and the west. Ezekiel chapter 48, verse 30 through 34 talks about the four directions in the diagram of the layout and the construct of the city, which has those rivers flowing. It says, And these are goings out of the city on the north side, 4,500 measures. And the gates of the city shall be after the names of the tribes of Israel. 3 gates northward, 1 gate of Reuben, 1 gate of Judah, 1 gate of Levi. And at the east side, 4,500 and 3 gates, and 1 gate of Joseph, 1 gate of Benjamin, 1 gate of Dan. And at the south side, 4,500 measures, and 3 gates, 1 gate Simeon, 1 gate of Issachar, 1 gate of Zebulun, and at the west side 4,500, and there 3 gates, 1 gate of Gad, 1 gate of Asher, 1 gate of Naphtali. And this is the location, remember, is where the water flows. The fountains of the river of living water flows out that. And that's the location where Christ will be centered. Obviously, Christ has the voice of many waters. So the likeness of the fountains of the river of the living water that flows out, right, is going to come from this location. And in the location of Solomon's temple, it also talks about a sea, which was the fountain of waters that were purifying waters that they had, and they had it in a brass molten sea. And this is why the likeness was made in Solomon's temple. 1 Kings chapter 7, verse 23, it says, And he made a molten sea 10 cubits from one brim to the other. It was round all about, and its height was 5 cubits, and a line of 30 cubits did compass it around about. And this is where water flowed for the priests inside this brass sea. And at Christ's throne, he has a glass sea. You can see that when you look to the prophecy. Revelation chapter 4, verse 6, And before the throne there was a sea of glass, like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne, and round about the throne, were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind. And so we see at the throne the glass sea, which is a fountain. It's a water fountain. It's a fountain of the water of life. And when we see the martyrs, you see the martyrs standing at the fountain of the water of life. Revelation chapter 15, verse 2 says, And I saw, as it were a sea of glass mingled with fire, and them that had gotten the victory over the beast, and over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God. And in Solomon's temple, what you would end up seeing is you would see that sea of brass, and then you would have like the people with the harps and the singers, they would be there at that presence, in that location on the steps at the temple. And the same thing occurs in the end. That's why you see the martyrs having the harps of God, the singing the songs, and they're standing at the glass sea, which is a fountain of purification water, fountain of the water of life. And then that proceeds out from the throne. And this is the promise of Christ, to give them the fountain of the water of life. Revelation chapter 21 verse 6 says, "And he said unto me, It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely." And when this water flows freely from that location, and the voice of many waters comes from Christ, and those waters break out, and it goes through the river of the city, you'll see the trees on both sides of the river. And that is the river that flows out the city with the trees on each side. The bank that's seen in Ezekiel chapter 47 verse 12. It says, "And by the river upon the bank thereof, on this side and on that side, shall grow all trees for meat, whose leaf shall not fade, neither shall the fruit thereof be consumed. It shall bring forth new fruit according to his months, because their waters they issued out of the sanctuary, and the fruit thereof shall be for meat, and the leaf thereof for medicine." You notice that the water is flowing from the sanctuary of the temple of the millennial temple, and that on each side the riverbanks are trees for medicine, or the leaves are for the medicine, but there are 12 manners of fruits. And this is what's revealed in the book of Revelation as well, for the healing of the nations. Revelation chapter 22 verse 1 and 2 says, "And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of God and of the Lamb. In the midst of the street of it, on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month, and the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations." And it's Christ who promises the tree of life. It's Christ with the authority to grant permission to have the right of the tree of life. It says in Revelation chapter 2 verse 7, "He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. To him that overcometh, I will give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God." So who is it that overcomes? People who overcome temptation to break the commandments and reject the commandments, right? Because you have to keep the commandments in order to have right to the tree of life. And you have to keep the commandments and the law in order to even enter into the gates of the city. And that is written in the book of Revelation chapter 22 verse 14. It says, "Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life, and may enter in through the gates into the city." So we end up seeing at the temple, we see that the two cherubs with the flaming sword protecting the tree of life. So we see there's two cherubs in the Garden of Eden when Adam was kicked out with the flaming sword to protect the tree of life. And we see in the end we have Christ with two angels with his face as if though a flaming sword protecting the way and entry into the tree of life in the end. Revelation chapter 1 verse 14 says, "His head and his hair were like the wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire." So we see a flame of fire in his face. And then in verse 15 it says, "And his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burn in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters." So we see his voice is as many waters, which is at Eden. "And he had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp 2-edged sword, and his countenance was as the sun shineth in his strength." So we see Christ's face with many waters that break out into many waters, just like the Garden of Eden with the fountain of living water that breaks out into 4 heads, to 4 directions. We see the living water coming out of Christ, and from his face we see a flame and a sword with Christ with 2 angels. And so what we do see here is we see Christ protecting the way into the Garden of Eden, because Christ is God who was at the beginning in the Garden of Eden when Adam was kicked out and sent eastward. And this is the prophecy of the flaming sword.